check this out. Vernon Davis is on with Steiny and Evan earlier today and was asked, do you like Brock Purdy? Which I'm sure wasn't asked exactly that way. It sounds like we're all in third grade. Do you like Brock Purdy?
Totally.
Do you have a crush on him? Here's Vernon's answer.
Yeah, I love Brock Purdy. I think he's great. I think he has a lot of potential. He has a lot of potential to be a great quarterback over time. Right now, he's shown us that he can go out and win games for sure, but we just don't know how consistent that's going to be because we haven't had enough data to show that Brock Purdy is here to stay.
Okay, we don't have enough data. Let's focus on that for just a second. There's also another word in there that I found. If I were Brock, I don't care, but if I were Brock, I would be motivated and almost borderline triggered by the word potential.
Yeah, I heard that.
Excuse me? I've got the potential to do what? To do what? I've played 21 games in this league, and I have as many playoff wins as Matt Stafford. I have the potential to be good?
To be great.
That would annoy me.
Yeah, I guess. But, he has the potential to maybe be what Fred Warner thinks that he could be, which is one of the greatest in football. And Fred Warner came out and said that very thing, like, Brock Purdy could be the greatest in football, pretty soon. And so that's kind of what Vernon Davis is speaking to, is that level of potential. Yes, Brock Purdy's already good, and Vernon said that. He likes Brock Purdy. He likes him.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Very good.
And so, he likes him. He thinks he's good, but he has the potential to be truly, truly great.
Howard Eskin in Philadelphia is going to join us in 23 minutes. I just wanted to throw that out there because we had this conversation about the Eagles trade earlier today and whether everything that the Eagles have been doing you can trace back to their embarrassing loss on December 3rd, you said it was?
Yeah.
Against the 49ers last year. So we'll check in with Howard, and he'll probably say something funny about Gabe Kapler, and then we'll move on with our lives. But he's always a fun conversation. So he'll hop on here in 23 minutes. How does the idea grab you when Vernon Davis says, not enough data? We do not have enough data on Brock Purdy as of yet.
Well, that's what Steinmetz was saying before. Matt Steinmetz talking about a small sample and 21 games as a starter being not enough. And Matt was saying that he wants to see it again before he feels comfortable giving Brock Purdy $55 or $60 million. So that is what some are saying. Some believe that the sample size is still not big enough. And for me, from the outside looking in, I get that argument, but I look at what the owner has said, Jed York, and I look at what Kyle Shanahan has said about his quarterback, and I don't think that they need a bigger sample to believe that Brock Purdy is their franchise quarterback and that Brock Purdy will get paid big money. But when you look at just the numbers and the number of games, you could look at that part of it and say, well, that is a kind of a small sample relative to other quarterbacks in the league. But then you look at what you talked about, 4 playoff wins already in a year and a half as a starter. So what do you want to look at? Do you want to look at the small number of regular season games? Do you want to look at top 5 in the MVP? Do you want to look at 4 playoff victories? What do you want to look at from a numbers standpoint to make your argument?
Hold on a second. I got to ask a question here.
Go ahead.
How many games do we get to continue to call a small sample?
That's a wonderful question. Yeah.
Because
it's all relative.
After year 1, we heard small sample.
And it was.
And I remember Herm Edwards came on our show and we went, Herm, the sample, or was it Mooch? Maybe both of them. I'm like, the sample, it's kind of getting larger. And they're like, yeah, it's not that small anymore. And then he went through an entire year coming off of a devastating arm injury, got the 1 seed and took the Super Bowl to overtime. Perfect? No. Nobody's saying that. Don't get crazy. I don't want your texts. You want to call me a Brock stan? Go for it. How long do we get to do this? Small sample. How long do we get to say small sample while Jordan Love gets $55 million a year,
right,
and C.J. Stroud is one of the MVP favorites, and everybody wants to this, that, and the other about these? How many games is a small sample? How long are we going to do this?
It depends on how you want to frame your argument. And if you are somebody who's not sold on Brock Purdy, then you look at small sample size and you lean on that as your reason. For me, I don't think that the sample size in terms of number of games is as important as what you've done in those games. Brock Purdy is 17-4 in the regular season as a starter. So yes, 21 games is a season and a quarter worth of football. And in that season and a quarter, he's only lost 4 times. One of those 4 games he lost was because the kicker couldn't make an easy kick.
Yep.
And then he had a meltdown against Baltimore. He had a couple of bad games against Minnesota. Okay games.
It was all right.
He was not great against Cincinnati.
No,
Minnesota, he made some mistakes. However you want to parse it, the man is 17-4 in those games as a starter. Meanwhile, you talked about Jordan Love. He started 18 games, and he's 9-9. And yet he got the bag.
$55 million per year, tied to be the biggest contract in the NFL.
9-9.
9-9.
So is his 18-game sample bigger than Brock Purdy's?
No.
Well, of course not. It's actually smaller by 3 games.
Not only by 3 games, I'd argue it's even smaller than that because Jordan has played 2 playoff games.
Right.
2.
Right.
And one of
the games he started was in his rookie year, and he went 0-1. And, he threw 62 passes as a rookie, and he started 1 game.
Yep.
So he really only started 1 year. And yet Green Bay didn't think that the sample was so small. Green Bay gave him the bag. And the Niners are going to give Brock the bag. Maybe a bag that big, maybe a bigger bag than what Jordan Love got.
They gave Jimmy a bag off of 6 games.
Exactly.
Now you could argue back, and they were wrong. And you could have that argument, let's not do it. We did it
took him to the Super Bowl.
For years, yeah. But I get, I don't think that this is that small of a sample. I just don't.
I just think that is an easy weapon for the haters. So if you want to look at, for example, Brandon Podjemski, if you want to think that Brandon Podjemski is not that good, you can go to small sample size.
Okay.
And you can go, you know what? 1 year, it's a small sample size. He had a nice rookie year. He was all rookie, and he was better than I thought, but it's a small sample. Go out there and do it again. And I think that Jonathan Kuminga is another one where, I want to see it one more time. Yeah, he made that 3rd-year leap, but it's kind of a small sample. It's the first year that he really was leaned on. So
Okay.
I'm not a Jonathan Kuminga fan, so I'm going to say small sample size. I think that it is an arrow in the quiver of the hater.
Yes. You hear people say this. Hey, we've watched people pop before and then turn into a pumpkin. All right, I'm going to wait. I would like to wait for someone. Don't start talking about Jeremy Lin, an NFL quarterback that has had 2 seasons. I know the first season was not a full season, but 2 seasons of incredibly effective play and playoff advancement, multiple games both times, who then turned out to be not that good of a player. Again, nobody's calling him the best QB in the league. We're not doing that. But the comment from Vernon Davis, hear it again.
Yeah, I love Brock Purdy. I think he's great. I think he has a lot of potential. He has a lot of potential to be a great quarterback over time. Right now, he's shown us that he can go out and win games for sure, but we just don't know how consistent that's going to be because we haven't had enough data to show that Brock Purdy is here to stay.
I don't know how consistent he's going to be because we don't have enough data. Give me the comp. I want to hear it. Who's the 21-game NFL starter with 4 playoff victories, 2 trips to an NFC title game, and 1 trip to a Super Bowl, and mano-a-mano overtime with supposedly the greatest of all time, who then sucked?
Well,
go ahead. I'm listening. Okay. Who is it?
Well, and I'm not going to give you the name. I'm going to give you the numbers first because if I give you the name, then everybody's going to think some kind of way about the name. But there was a quarterback who started, 23 games in his first 2 years as a starter, and he went 17-6 in those games. In the playoffs, this quarterback went 4-2 in those games as a starting quarterback.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Then, subsequent to that, he would go on to be 11-24 in his next 3 years as a starter, and he is no longer in the National Football League.
Oh, maybe that's not who I was thinking of then.
Dibs and I have the same guy in mind.
I hate when you and I are in lockstep. Oh, I love it because you're brilliant.
Yeah, you'll get a ding.
Go ahead and tell him who it is.
You don't have to go too far. It's Colin Kaepernick.
Correct.
Oh.
Thank you, Mark. With a C, not Mark with a K. And it's crazy that you and I, because I saw you pull the mic down, and I thought, oh God, he's got one. I need to have one. I'm the co-host. You're not. I need to come up with one. And it hit me, Colin Kaepernick, and I ran the numbers, 17-6 as a starter.
I thought you were going to say Jimmy Garoppolo.
No, but I
thought that's where you were heading with the conversation.
Yep. Colin Kaepernick, 17-6 his first 2 years as a starter.
And even took over mid-season, much like Brock Purdy did.
Yep.
And then he went 4-2 in the offs. And then, that third year was the Harbaugh, I'm self-immolating my situation year. And then that was a wrap.
The roster was terrible. And obviously the political side of what happened to his life and career.
Right.
Okay. The interesting thing is the two best examples that you're going to be able to come up with to fight what I'm saying, both are with the 49ers.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's actually working against Brock. Brock's biggest problem is Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jimmy, 19-5 in his first 3 years as a starter. And in the playoffs, he was 2-1.
Yep.
They made the one playoff run.
Brock's biggest problem is Jimmy Garoppolo because of the arc of Jimmy's career. It makes people think that if you ever were to play without Kyle Shanahan, or God forbid, maybe this will just keep happening with Kyle Shanahan, where you're just good enough to fall just short. Because of that arc, people will put that on Brock. My response to those people would be, as I think most 49er fans would agree, at what point did Jimmy Garoppolo ever look like Brock Purdy or put up numbers like Brock Purdy has had? Never. And so he was good. I was certainly in his corner. But at the same time, the Niner offense never operated like this under Jimmy Garoppolo. And when they would go to the playoffs, they would hand the ball off to the running back.
Yeah, the 1 year that Jimmy led him to the Super Bowl, he had 3,978 yards, 27 TDs, and 13 picks.
Which is worse than Brock's numbers.
Yes.
But okay.
Brock was 4,280, 31-11. So slightly better in all. Quarterback rating for Brock of 113. Jimmy's quarterback rating that year was 102.
Yeah.
So Brock was more than a click, probably 2 clicks better across the board, but in Jimmy's best year, 13-3, it was somewhat comparable to what Brock did. So it was comparable-ish. It wasn't as good. The team wasn't as good either. The offense.
Jimmy never looked like this.
Emmanuel Sanders versus Brandon Ayuk. I mean, we can do tit for tat.
I guess that's sort of my thing when you call it too small of a sample, is if you look at Brock and has he had bad games? Has he had bad quarters? Of course, who doesn't have that? But Brock has never not looked like Brock. Like, if this was all based on a couple games where just things popped like crazy, then I'd be able to hear it. Actually, the reverse is true. You go, he had 11 picks last year. He had 4 of them one game. That means just 7 interceptions the rest of the season.
He would have had more had they not given him the mercy poll.
Well, that's fine too, but that's also part of what holds his numbers back. When you say why the 49ers, they barely ever throw the ball, worst in the league. Right, because they're up by 20 in the fourth quarter, half the games. And he either sits or they just turn around and hand the ball off. So there's always ways to massage the numbers in your favor.
Of course.
And I'll say for the 80th time, no one's calling Brock the creme de la creme of the league. But I would certainly fight back on the idea of we don't have enough data to know if he'll be consistent. He's never not been consistent.
17-4 in the regular year, 4-2 in the playoffs. So you're talking about 21-6. And of those 6 losses, 1, his arm fell off. 1, the kicker missed a chippy. And I'm not going to be the Brockistan. That's more your lane. But if you want to look at his 6 losses, there are.
Don't you be stealing my thing.
Totally.
It's my thing.
He lost when his arm fell off. His kicker missed an easy kick, and he lost in the Super Bowl in overtime. That's 3 of his 6 defeats.
Right.
So if you want to play pick and pop with the numbers, he has 6 losses, but 3 of them were, kind of out of his control a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just is interesting. For me, the whole idea of what is a sample? When is a sample big enough? And we talk about the baseball season and the Giants, and everyone always says, well, you can't even worry about the standings until you get to June 1st, 2 months, and then we can look. Well, turns out this Giants team, what we thought about them after 1 week is what we think about them after 5 months. So sometimes the small sample can be actually what the big sample is going to end up being. So I'm not saying Brock's going to win 17 of every 21 games. That's unreasonable to expect, but the small sample of Brock Purdy might eventually be who he is as a career quarterback, which is accurate, efficient,
pretty good,
and very good. Pretty good. Right?
I'm not arguing that this is the biggest sample ever. I just think it's funny. Like, how many seasons do we get to do small sample?
Yeah.
Because we all had this conversation after the first year, and I got that. 6 games regular season, then 3 in the playoffs, and one of them was not really a game because he had to leave right away. And you come out of it and you go, well, it's not only a small sample, but he's hurt. He's about to undergo massive arm surgery. Then he comes back, battles out of that in a wildly impressive fashion, and then leads the team to the 1 seed and all the way to overtime of the Super Bowl, and everyone circles right back to the exact same point you had a year ago? Small sample.
I think.
Wait, how are we doing this again next offseason?
I think the small sample phrase is essentially code for we don't know if he can do it without 5 All-Pros around him.
Okay, that's
we
fair.
have a small sample of him without all these great talent around him.
Okay, fair, but also a funny question that I think we sort of at least attempted to debunk yesterday, which is simply the idea that when you see a good team in sports, it automatically means there's good people. There's good people around him.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson, I'm the greatest coach ever. Well, how'd you do when you didn't have Michael and Kobe and Shaq? You stunk.
Think about Matthew Stafford. When he finally wins a Super Bowl with the Rams, look at who he had on his team. He had Aaron Donald, one of the greatest to ever do it. He had Odell Beckham Jr., who played his best football of his career over the course of about 3 or 4 weeks.
Cupper Coop.
He had Cupper Coop. He had an unbelievable team that all came together. And since then, Matthew Stafford's been good, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer because his career numbers are great. But is Matthew Stafford, are we holding him on the hook for not elevating Kyron Williams and Van Jefferson when he was there?
I mean, I think all these are great examples, and I want to keep qualifying them because I know how it sounds. Nobody's crowning Brock Purdy. I'm just focused on that phrase, small sample. Not that small. And how long do we get to use that? Because if you're going to do it after 20-some-odd games, why wouldn't you do it after 30-some-odd games? He's still going to be a 25-year-old player with not a lot of experience after this year. And if he goes and gets him the 1 seed again, are we doing this again?
Right.
Is someone going to call us in February and be, well, watch out about that contract? Pretty small sample.
I wonder when the sample is no longer small. That to me is the interesting thing. Like, when does the sample no longer become small?
Wouldn't it be like, okay, so if it hits your ear funny, if you go, dude, Brock is minted. He's clearly a very good player. This is done. Wouldn't it hit your ear in an even stranger way if you said it in the opposite? In other words, like,
he needs to move to Missouri and show me.
Well, like Brock has.
As for Guru.
Brock has not really. I mean, he hasn't done anything.
He hasn't shown us.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I like.
When your owner comes out and says, yeah, I've actually been bag shopping because I need a bigger bag for what we're going to give Brock Purdy. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, what Jed York said. Yeah. But he came out and said, Brock's going to get it now. He's going to get.
We're running the risk of every single person we're mimicking. They're all Herm. They're all Herm Edwards. All of them.
I can't help it.
Better get a contract now.
Herm is. He's my spirit animal.
Oh my God!
Whenever I'm down, I try to channel my inner Herm.
All right, Willard and Dibs, and a bunch of you want to weigh in. Let's dip our toe in the water, but we ask for your patience because we want to get to all of you, and so we will. Keep them coming. We're going to start with David in El Cerrito. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think Carson Wentz is another fine example of someone who came on pretty strong.
Good call. Good call.
But as an Eagles fan, I didn't think he was ever good.
Interesting.
And when every one of my friends was telling me how good he was, especially after the Bears game where he had this big moment early in his career, I'm like, that play looked like a design. It looked like a fake look off. He threw it deep. He hit a guy, and the whole town went crazy. But I always thought the eye test told me that he couldn't do certain things. And one of those things was he couldn't read the field. He couldn't throw guys open. He could hit the obvious on a very, very talented team. He's out of the league. And this guy was praised.
Not quite out of the league. Just want to make sure we're accurate. Not out of the league. Isn't he Mahomes' backup? He's Mahomes' backup this year, David.
He may be.
Yeah,
he may be. But I'll say this: the question just comes down to that you're paying. You may have to pay this guy X amount, which is an absurd amount of money, and if he's not surrounded by the rest, it might tank your team for a long time down the road. And that is the risk as a fan. It's like, yes, he is great in this system, but there is an eye test. Has nothing to do with stats. Has nothing to do with a small sample size. It has to do with the things we see, and can he do them without all these players? Because if he can't and he gets this money, then we're dead for you.
Well, but David, I'd argue that's the job of a front office always with all football teams, is to not let your team be filled with bad players all over the place. And thanks, David. Some really good points. I'd also say the eye test, for me, is the thing that does separate him from a Jimmy or a Colin Kaepernick. I get why our fan base is triggered by this idea of getting too fat, too happy, too quick, because we've had two quarterbacks that have both gone to a Super Bowl and lost and then turned into pumpkins. But if you've watched every game, Brock Purdy and his offense do not look like Jimmy Garoppolo and his offense.
Nor do they look like Carson Wentz early in his career. And, the things that he had that were warts in his game only got exacerbated as time went on.